What do you get when you cross a mega corporation with a clerk in a subcontinent full of loot? You get an empire owned by shareholders. We all know about corporations like Nike or Apple that have overseas production, like a factory in Malaysia that makes their iPhones on the cheap. Now imagine if instead of just having a factory there, some executives in Apple decided it would be easier to just own the country. That way they can write their own regulations and increase their profits. One thing leads to another, and suddenly Apple is ruling Malaysia. They're not ruling as a government either. They're ruling as a corporation for executive bonuses and shareholder profits. The people are suffering for it. Not only that, Apple is collecting taxes and using those taxes to fund a military larger than that of the United States' own. They need a military like that to keep a hold over their new empire. This is not far off from what the British East India Company did in India in the 18th and 19th centuries. They had a military larger than the British government's, they collected taxes, and they wrote laws for their own profits. It turns out that running a country for the profits of a few executives and shareholders is not good for the people. Roughly 10 million Indians starved because of it. Millions more were impoverished. When you look at something like that, you have to ask, how did this happen? How did a corporation end up ruling a country? The answer is long and complicated, but it centers around the figure of Robert Clive. This is India. This is India in 1748. A lot of Europeans back then wanted to go to India because they had a lot of cool things, especially fabrics. Here's a list of some of the words they had for fabric that we borrowed. Calico, pajama, gingham, dungaree, chintz, and khaki. So a lot of the European powers made companies with monopolies on trade in Asia, like the Dutch, French, and English. But these companies had a problem. India was really, really far away. It could easily take 6 months to sail there, if you went at the right time of year to catch the monsoon winds. So they had to be able to operate independently without the help of their governments. To do this, they were given a number of special rights, like the right to mint coins, govern territories, and to raise armies. This is India again. Here, and here were some British trading posts. This one was called Madras. In 1746, the French took Madras from the English. They also happened to take this guy prisoner. His name was Robert Clive. Clive was miserable. "This sucks. This whole thing sucks," he didn't say. "I have not enjoyed one happy day since I left my native country," he did say. But don't feel too bad for him. When he was in that native country, he spent all his time fighting or running a protection racket. But when the French took him prisoner, suddenly he got a lot more interested in life. He managed to escape captivity and then joined the East India Company military. This was when his real talents became apparent. It turned out that being a small-town thug and waging a small war required a lot of the same skills. Robert Clive was able to repeatedly defeat his enemies by using unconventional tactics, like attacking at night or in fog. He was aggressive, fearless, and had an eye for opportunity. At the Siege of Arcot in particular, he made a name for himself by holding out against a much larger enemy until help arrived. By 1755, Clive had returned home with a wife and a sizable fortune. He spent a great deal of that fortune trying to buy himself a seat in Parliament, but ultimately he failed. By now, what we would call the 7 Years' War between Britain and France was looming on the horizon, and company officials were concerned that conflict with France and India would cut into their profits. So they turned to Clive, asking him to go back to India to command their forces against the French. Clive agreed to go, probably hoping to earn himself another fortune. Now, at the time when we say India, we are not talking about a country. India was a region. There wasn't a single totally dominant political force in the region. The Mughal Empire was the most dominant force, but at the time it was very fragmented, and an individual ruler or Nawab in a specific region was mostly independent. For example, in the wealthy Bengal region, Siraj-ud-Dowlah was the effective ruler. However, he was not very popular. He's described as being very rude and abrasive to his own generals, indecisive at times and rash at others. Not a person who is likely to inspire a lot of loyalty. But both European powers in his territory were beginning to arm for what they saw as the inevitable war. Understandably, Siraj was not happy about this, so he ordered both sides to stop building fortifications. The French did, and the English didn't. So Siraj attacked the English-held city of Calcutta. He quickly took it. Remember, this was not like the Spanish in the New World or the British in China later, where they had a great technological advantage. The Mughals had gunpowder weapons and a much larger army than the British. After Siraj took the city, the surviving English were rounded up and put into a single small holding cell. It would later be known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. How many people were actually in the cell is debated, but it was well over 100. Between 40 and 123 of them died of thirst and heat. Coincidentally, Clive had just arrived, and he had a golden justification to apply as much force as he wanted to gain as much power as he wanted for the East India Company in Bengal. The stage had been set for the Battle of Plassey that would shape British and Indian history for centuries to come. The only piece remaining was Mir Jafar, a man whose name means traitor in some languages of India to this day.